Welcome to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. I'm Melissa Joy, a certified financial planner and the founder of Pearl Planning. My goal is to help you streamline and organize your finances, navigate big money decisions with confidence, and be strategic in order to grow your wealth. As a woman, you work hard for your money, and I'm here to help you make the most of it. Now, let's get into the show. As someone who has helped coach people through retirement, I find that the financial concepts of retirement are spoken about often, but the concept of retirement itself is somewhat unexplored, and we definitely need more resources to help us imagine and envision and figure out retirement. And we have just that today with the authors of Your Retirement Sketchbook. So I'm thrilled to be joined by a friend, Jamie Hopkins, who is the CEO of Bryn Mawr Trust, and his co-author, Bonnie Treichel, who is the CEO of Endeavor Retirement. And they have a book that's being published imminently, all about retirement and how you need to think about it. Jamie, Bonnie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us on. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Bonnie. And maybe I'll start with you, Bonnie. So the book is like short, snackable chapters that go over 125 concepts that are important for retirees to know and understand. How did you and Jamie decide to write the book and, come up with this vision?
Great question. So I think, Jamie had this vision for having a sketchbook type of concept. And I think we really wanted something, think coffee table type of book. Think about something that is very approachable and fun for thinking about retirement planning. So it doesn't just have to be for a retiree, but someone who's preparing for it. Or think about, from my perspective, it's that book that you can sit around the dinner table and pick it up, put it down. You don't have to do it as a straight read through type of book, but it's really more of that workbook type of thing. So, Jamie had this crazy idea. And if you know Jamie long enough, he'll come to you and you're like, this is insane. Sure, I'm in. Let's do it. So he had this idea, came to me, and it really started to come together. And for me, it's this passion of really thinking about when I was younger, we didn't talk about money, politics, or religion, right? We were taught that that wasn't polite to do so. And so I wanted something that could get people interested in sitting around the dinner table and talking about money, talking about that future of retirement. So that's, kind of my passion and how that came together and saying yes to Jamie's crazy idea.
Well, I can totally envision, having had a chance to check out the book, that this would be great for a couple to, kind of flip through. It would be inspirational to use as a launching point for some journaling and some activities like that. And also, you could get together with your girlfriends and kind of have, what do you envision for retirement? So lots of great launching points, and it's a very approachable book. Jamie, if I could ask you, because I know I've known you over the years, and you really are an educator to financial advisors as well as to large groups of people, about how to think about a myriad of financial concepts. For you, as you look at what our parents' retirement was versus what we hope retirement will be for ourselves and our clients, what has changed? What are we getting right now that we used to kind of miss?
It's such a good question because this book's also like 20 years of my retirement experience and the different ways I've thought and how it's changed. So like I've gone through a bit of that myself. Like, how do I think differently about this than 20 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, most of us kind of create this retirement vision in part due to whether it's our families, like our parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends that retire. And that's how we start like piecing it all together in our mind. And what you find is a lot of people haven't actually like done their own version of it. It's like, well, my parents did this, somebody I used to work with did this. Because we haven't lived through retirement, we have to piece it together from other people's experiences. And in that, we get a lot of stuff wrong because we're like, well, what your grandparents did in the 1980s and 1990s for retirement was a completely different world. From an investing standpoint, it was. From a product set, and annuities really were not a great subset of products back then. Just the longevity, housing costs, all these things. So I think part of it is you really need to build something that is personalized, not just experiences that people had at different decades out there. Some of the stuff I do think we really get wrong is planning towards averages. That's something I bring up a lot, and it's a similar concept that we gear ourselves to the average retirement age or the average life expectancy. And I'm always like, well, you're going to be wrong 50% of the
Is
time. Like
it
that, averages when we think about life expectancy is a terrible measure because, like, that's a coin flip. Like, I don't think a coin flip style approach is very good at anything. So, right, what's the longevity? How's your health, family health? And it's never perfect, but you should look at those factors versus using, side of actuary tables because they're going to be wrong, half the time. And I think that's one thing we really get wrong in the planning world around retirement today.
I would have to agree with you, and there's so many phases of retirement. I think that, so many people think of retirement as this finish line and it all is figured out and then it's all wrapped up. You put your final investment allocation in and just like you've done all that research up front. There's so much focus on like withdrawal rates and stuff and then it's just like I don't know what they think is next, maybe hibernation. And there are so many phases of retirement that I see with my clients. There's like active living, checking off the bucket list. There's staying closer to home. There's end of life care, and all of those need to be wrapped into something, which really, in essence, means that we need it to be prepared for more. Bonnie, when you kind of broke out things, because I think you guys did a great job of really having a bunch of different concepts, but kind of grouping them. Um, how did you figure out how to kind of divide and conquer in the sections of the book?
Well, there's from the divide and conquer perspective, Jamie and I have different expertise. So that was one of the great things about the partnership for the book is bringing together our different expertise. So I come more from the plan background and Jamie comes more from the wealth background. But I think one of the cool things about the book is that we were able to really divide it up in these different it's really snackable, but then within the chapters, it's divided up into really that like thinking about your lifetime and thinking about this kind of arc concept. So when you think about it, it's, starting with what is that relationship with money and thinking about it just from the beginning, and then thinking about it in the saving and then the investing. And again, throughout all the way to end of life thoughts.
Mhm.
So, really thinking about all the different things that impact you. And one of the things that I think is unique about this book is that, yes, there's the basic investing concepts, basic saving concepts, but probably half of the book are things that I'm going to call are the softer side of it, more about the emotional aspects. And some of those things that I think are often overlooked, but to the point that we were making earlier, probably some of the more important things that we have to think about when we think about retirement. Maybe it's going to be a phased retirement. We're not just going to like fall off the cliff at retirement age, and go into hibernation. We're going to do other things. And so, really thinking about what that transition or phased retirement might be. And so, I think that's one of the great things about the book is that it does include a lot of those other thoughts and more of the what is your vision for retirement that isn't just the traditional, hey, it's a couple walking on the beach holding hands.
Yeah, that couple on the beach needs to be retired because how often
I
I mean,
know.
the sand is a lot to clean off too, but, how many of us are really, like, spending most of our retirement just, like, walking into the sunset? Um, I when I kind of talk to clients about retirement, we're looking for books just like yours and a multi-year, kind of approach where there is the hard technical financial planning of like, how does this actually work? But then, for so many of the people like myself that I work with, and I know our listeners, so much of your identity is entwined with the work that you do. You're your time is really owned by your career in many cases for high achievers. And I know, Jamie, that you've been working on retirement vision boards with people, which is a great companion exercise to, kind of engaging with the book. Can you how do you get people away from the reality that is today and comfortable with kind of exploring what the purpose and the passions and the use of time that will occur in retirement if mapped out correctly?
Yeah, this all goes down to the individual level too. There's some advisors that just hate this concept, and I'm sure there's some people too. Like my dad, no chance he's going to do a retirement vision board. Like I'm not going to talk him into it. But these are always the things like you ask questions before you suggest solutions. And so if you know somebody is more creative or is really into goal setting and they always talk about the goals they've set, then like they're probably more open to these concepts. And I've done it before in rooms where I just said, who's ever used a vision board for a project or something before? And you'll see like 60% of the people in the room raise their hand and say, okay, well, then there's my audience. The other 40%, they've probably heard about it, doesn't really interest them, like for whatever reason, right? They just don't want to. So I'm not going to try to force them into it. But then this idea of a vision board is actually like putting yourself on the vision board. So we actually do take photos of the people and we put it in, and then I've used about like 12 different concepts. So one of the ones is like, what's your biggest concern about retirement? So that goes on the vision board. Like, what is the top 3 values you have? That goes on there. Where do you want to live? And be like specific, like the city, state, not like I want to live by the beach, but like pick something, like really name it. And if you want a beach home and the couple walking on the beach together, right? Like name it like Sandy Shores. If you want a mountain house, pick that. If you want to live in the city, right? Pick the area of the city that you love, even if it's not the one you'll eventually live in. But those exercises are all kind of based in connectivity to these future activities. So there's kind of like two things that happens there. One of them is that you actually anchor in these future points in time, like the more time you spend on them. So then you actually like work towards these things instead of a lot of our goal setting is done like backwards, and we anchor in today. And I say like I want to lose 20 pounds. Well, I've anchored in my current weight, which makes it really hard to do versus like I'm going to weigh 180 pounds on December 24th, the day before like holidays, whatever.
Mhm.
And then you work back from that. And vision boards kind of operate like that, like set this vision and then go through the planning of like how I'm going to get to all these different things. So, how am I going to get to Nashville? How am I going to buy a home there? Right. Like, how am I going to deal with my biggest concern is, dementia or, decline in mental cognitive state. And so what are all the things I'm doing about these? And it just puts pictures to it. I think it's fun and approachable then. And it's not about how much money I have. We put no numbers on there at all, right? So there's nothing about your 401k or IRA or taxes or how much you're going to spend. It's all, kind of your vision and values, and it's a fun exercise. And so I've had some advisors now that actually go print these out for clients after they do them. And so the client can walk away with this kind of like fun vision board. And ultimately, that came from the idea of everybody talks about wanting more engagement. Clients talk about wanting more engagement with their advisors. Advisors talk about wanting more client engagement or just a great client engagement. This is a different way to engage some, probably not all of your clients, but you can engage some of them in a really fun, meaningful way here.
Well, and I always describe to people that come and work with us that, there's a sort of Maslow's hierarchy of wealth management and financial planning, and certain people, they just want the basics covered, like, is there money in my account every month? Do I have, the appropriate protection? And that's totally fine. But for other people that, kind of getting to the wisdom level or exploring purpose and identity and so much more is there's room for that once you have the basics covered. And the reality is for many people that benefit from working with a financial professional, in a lot of the benefit is that blocking and tackling of financial decisions, but then the companionship to talk about, hey, you're the call I was just on. We're talking about a big budget for travel for a client's 65th birthday, and we've been talking about this for 4 or 5 years, and but she's not a spender, and so, the whole conversation today was like, "I know you're probably not gonna hit your $60,000 budget for your age 65 travel, which you could totally afford, and that's okay, but let's talk through how to make it bigger if you want to, while you have the choice." And I think we could probably benefit from the first
Mhm.
section of the book, your relationship with money, because that endures into retirement, right, Bonnie? What did you guys what do you think how do you make sure that that concept is really understood, by your typical reader? And what do you think is most important for them to understand about their relationship with money?
Yeah, I think, we put that right up front, the relationship with money, and really had that focus up front. But I do think it stitches throughout the entire book when we talk about some of these other concepts. Also, we've left space in the book again to make it more like a workbook style. So there's those sketchbook pages at the end of every chapter. So, really reinforcing this idea that this is your sketchbook. This is your opportunity to take your vision and your relationship with money, and you can sketch along the way. So, this whole kind of sketchbook concept is you're going to draw, you're going to erase, you're going to adjust, and you're going to continue to take your value set and what you believe and adjust as you go because things are going to change. Your values are going to change. Your family situation is going to change. All things can change as you go. But if you start with kind of your values and your relationship and understanding them, then you can infuse that throughout your life and change and resketch and bold some things as you go. But it's not just sticking to some specific, here's what the spreadsheet says and here's what I must do, but it gives you the freedom and flexibility to evolve as you go and learn about all these other concepts throughout the book.
That sounds perfect, and I can't emphasize enough for our listeners that it's okay to have a targeted goal and then make an adjustment. I mean, that's life is pivoting, editing. One example I can think of is a client who's really emphasized a desire to have a second home that would really eventually become their primary residence on the other side of the country. They happen to live in California. And then their adult daughter was getting married and then decided to relocate that close to home in California. And that changed everything. Maybe there would be grandkids and that all the time we spent discussing the second home pivoted back toward changes to the primary residence and that's great. I think it was time well spent to have that game plan. It moved the retirement goals forward and, kind of kept focus on having the financial resources to do this big second addition, like purchase. And it got us into a more prepared place
Mhm.
for the, pivot
Mhm.
anyway. And, that's part of the beauty of financial planning. Um, Jamie, if you think about it, since you're an educator at heart, I think, hopefully it's fair to say that, what do you think
It's
people
fair.
what do you think that people get the most wrong about retirement? Like what are we still missing even if as we've had this evolution where it's more um culturally acceptable to discuss and think about in a hopefully a healthier way. What do we need to focus on next?
Yeah, I'll actually give you 3 things. I know you asked for 1,
No,
but,
3 is great.
I'll try to give you the first one first. And I think you hit it, is the, retirement models have been very static. So they're like linear, right? So we talk about 4% distribution, which is very well known. At least most people have heard that at some point. Not everybody, but a lot of people. But that's this like very static model. It doesn't really adjust for life and downturns in the market in the sense of changing dynamic spending. Like, you just react differently. When there's high inflation, you spend less money, and
Mhm.
the models don't react to a lot of that. So I'd say over the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a lot of research and technology's caught up to where we can have what I call, like, adaptive retirement planning, and adaptive retirement planning is more how we live life. that we're not just spending some constant amount adjusted for inflation for 30 years. We adjust up and down, we make changes, we spend more one year and less the next year. We push off something if there's another high expense, right? Like we just wait longer to buy the next thing. And that's very normal. And so I think that normalizing that is really important, that our planning is a version of how this is going to go, but it's not the be all end all. So I think that's one. The second one you actually hit on, that's the first story, which was we don't give ourselves permission to spend enough. When we're talking about clients for the three of us and probably most of your listeners, you have some amount of accumulated savings. The bottom third of the country that has nothing saved, they're in a completely different world. Like you can't give yourself permission to spend when you have no money. But that's not solved by good retirement planning. There's more policy work that needs to be done there. But for many retirees, they actually underspend in retirement, like your story, um, because we live in this scarcity mindset of running out of money, and that we self-insure, we hold on to all these assets in retirement out of fear of outliving our money. And what the data shows is that most people with, a half million, $1 million of savings and more underspend, and they actually could spend more in retirement. So giving ourselves permission through planning and like envisioning what we want to do is super powerful. And the last one is, and Bonnie mentioned it quickly, was end of life planning. We're still terrible at that. I mean, from a statistic standpoint, I would argue that is the biggest thing we get wrong. It's less than 10% of Americans have an updated estate plan in place. That's really not acceptable, right? Like we're all going to pass away and we're leaving headaches and challenges to our family and loved ones or to somebody else. And, in that situation, we have to talk about this more. To your point, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's hard to talk about our death if we haven't taken care of some of these other things along the way. So I think proper planning actually enables us to have those conversations with loved ones and actually do planning for end of life. And I push on that one a lot. It kind of gets left off at it's like always like step 12 on a 10-step list for retirement planning. So,
Yes.
but we do have to talk about it and get better at that.
Well, I think for me, because so many of my clients, are Gen X, older millennial, and they're coming up against it with their parents
Mhm.
where, oh, mom and dad are very private about money. That's a, generational thing. And oh my gosh, they didn't file taxes last year. And also, like, didn't want to deal with some of these things. Or I can't even find the estate planning attorney because the estate planning attorney's older than mom and dad. And so if you don't proactively bring up the topic and use a book or a tool like this and others to kind of both, nudge mom and dad or the generation you're responsible for that's above you, and also like look in the mirror and be like, okay, if I expect this of others, I need to do it myself. Then this is just, it's a nicky subject. Who wants to think about who would take care of their minor children or make decisions or living with extra support? Not everybody loves to discuss that, but if you ignore it, it does not fix the issue. It compounds it. Bonnie, to pivot, because I don't wanna go so deep, we have a lot of episodes actually on, kind of preparing, and thinking about your kind of estate planning needs. But Bonnie, when you collaborated with Jamie, were there any chapters where you guys were going in different directions or really needed to, like, mediate and negotiate on different perspectives when it came to retirement?
Um, Good question. I I don't think we had too many different perspectives on like which direction to go. I would say probably the biggest difference is that on some of the things like the retirement plan chapter, right? I get pretty technical on that because that's my area of passion. And, and Jamie does a lot more on the behavioral side. So
Mhm.
that's probably where there had to be some like in between of, no one wants to go too deep on secure 2.0 provisions and how they impact, retirement
Yes, we
plans.
did cut
So
some of
so that's probably the biggest mediation point. I don't know, Jamie, what do you think?
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah, that was probably it. We got overly technical in the middle for a bit. But to the point, like you want to find a balance there. But it was a lesson I learned from a previous book because I had a friend of mine say, "Oh, this book's not for me." And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "Oh, 'cause it's got all these technical industry jargon terms in it." But he's a 43-year-old doctor who runs a hospital, and he felt like the book wasn't for him because it had too much financial jargon. And so we actually learned was that books that do well in this space, like the best ones, actually hit an eighth grade reading level. As crazy as that is, ours is probably still a little bit above that, but we tried really hard to get it more approachable, less technical, less jargon. So that was probably one of the mediations because both Bonnie and I are both attorneys by trade. So like we want to write it this other like really structured, different format. And so the editing of it is hard to take what feels like our voices and make it for more approachable for others. But we actually wrote the book, as odd as it's gonna sound, mostly in Excel, which I don't know how many people have done that, but because it's
Tell me
125.
more.
Yeah, so we probably had 150 some original
Mhm.
chapters-ish, and so we narrowed it down a bit. Eventually, too many is too many. But we did, like, the topic, who was gonna write it, a fact, a quote, an explanation of it, planning around that topic, and then reflection questions, and so we filled in an entire spreadsheet of 125 like
Mm.
that. Now, that is not what's actually written in the book. We then took that and put it and like turned it into more of an actual, written. So it's not like block, 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 block. But yeah, we really wrote the whole book inside of an Excel sheet, which is very, I guess that's very financial planning.
Well, and I also think, like, I love both of your descriptions. I work collaboratively with another planner. We have, like, most of our clients, we know both of them know them. And for any given topic, that right brain, left brain of like the technical versus the art, is sometimes one of us picks up the behavioral, uh, kind of cues from the client, and other times one of us will pull out, technical provision of Secure Act 2.0, and it's like, that never would have crossed my mind because 'cause I'm just trying to convince them to spend more or less money, and so it's really nice to have this perspective, um, of more than one person, and I think that also speaks to those of you that are considering a retirement journey that, you may not have all the angles to see what you may need to consider, and that's where hopefully a financial planning done right really gets it right. Um, we're wrapping up, but, is there anything that you're taking away, I'll start with Bonnie, from the work on the book that is going to kind of inspire your own insight on retirement? And then I'll ask Jamie.
We've been asked a similar question before, and I think one of the things it does, of course, is just like you have to eat your own cooking, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
So it takes a step back to reflect on like where I am in all of these pieces and
Mhm.
everything like from making sure my estate plan's up to date and things like that. So I think one of the things it does is just make sure that I'm doing all of these things that I'm suggesting, but it also, as we've been talking about, it continues to help me to think about how to make things approachable, fun, and really reinforce that power of visualization when working with clients. So I'm working with a lot of advisors in my practice, but helping me even just to think about the power of visualization in so many different aspects, because I do think it's really, really powerful when we can think about what visualization does and making things fun and approachable in so many different ways.
I love that. How about you, Jamie?
Yeah, and so, 2 quick things about the visualizations, like, it's okay that your drawings and sketches in front of clients are terrible. I it's not so much in the book that I talk about this, but I do in a presentation. They actually make it more approachable, and so it feels like an unfinished project, so then somebody's invited in to actually work on it. So, what they used to call, like, pencil sales, where you draw on the piece of paper and slide it across and show them. It's actually a very successful technique on engaging people. So use that on my own planning. Bonnie did answer similarly, but my wife and I, Kathy, updated our estate plan kind of through the process, because it is one of those things that when we did it, it was a decade ago, and our lives have changed substantially in the last decade, so it was worthwhile revisiting. But that's the one very concrete thing. I think the rest of it for me is probably more still, I don't know, aspirational in the future. Although I have also lived by this. I'm a big fan of Roth IRAs and Roth contributions, which I've written many, many times, and lots of people know that. And it's funny, my old book, somebody actually wrote on the review of it, "This guy likes Roth too much. Otherwise, I would have given it a higher rating." And I was like, "Great, that's exactly who I
I
am.
will
I've nailed
die
it."
on this alone.
But I have moved all of my 401k contributions to Roth, and so I do tell people that, that is, I don't just walk around telling people they should do this, and I'm trying to get a tax deduction this year. I very much believe in it. I've done Roth conversions before. I'm a big fan of Roth, so that is something I live by at this point too.
Well, and I will add a third commitment to refreshing the estate plan. So I think I've done it about every 5 years, and I'm getting some work done on kind of the organizational documents of the business that need to come first. But then once that's done, I've already told my estate planning attorney, "Hey, we need to look at this and do a refresh." And so that's something that find the people most reluctant to do their estate planning are often attorneys. So kudos to both of you for doing the refresh. And where can people, as we leave off, we'll have a link to the book in show notes, but where can people follow each of you? I'll start with Jamie.
Yeah, so I'm mostly on LinkedIn at this point, so I'm sure there'll be a link. But if you type in Jamie Hopkins Financial Services, I pop up everywhere. It's pretty easy. And then BMT.com is our company. And so those are the two best places to follow me at this point.
Thanks. And Bonnie?
And same, you can follow me on LinkedIn, Bonnie Treichel, or you can follow the company, endeavor-retirement.com. We also have a sister law firm, endeavor.law. So you can follow us there.
Love it. Congrats on the book. And thank you so much for making the time to join us.
Thanks for having us on, Melissa.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for listening to the Women's Money Wisdom podcast. If you found value in this episode, the best way that you can support the podcast is to forward an episode to a friend or leave a review. Go to proplan.com and the podcast link to get all the resources and links mentioned. This presentation by Pearl Planning is intended for general information purposes only. No portion of this presentation serves as a receipt of or a substitute for personal investment advice from Pearl Planning or any other investment professional of your choosing. Copies of Pearl Planning's current written disclosure brochure and Form CRS discussing our advisory services and fees are available upon request or on our website platform at pearlplan.com. The information that we share is meant to educate and inspire, not serve as personalized financial advice. Everyone's situation is unique, so be sure to consult with your own financial professional for guidance that fits your life. And just so you know, the opinions shared in this podcast are Melissa's own and those of her guests. They don't necessarily represent any organizations with which Melissa is affiliated. For more important disclosures, please go to our webpage at pearlplan.com.